outdoor activities like fishing and boating became far more than just a way to have fun in these COVID times. They became a lifeline to wellness. This leading mental health expert partnered with the RBFF to create the Get On Board campaign. She is going to show you how your organization can encourage newcomers to relieve pandemic fatigue on the water. Please welcome Dr. Sue Varma, and from the RBFF, it is Bruna Carincotte. Hello, ladies.
Hi, how are you?
Great to have you here. Thank you so much for coming, Bruna. Thanks for putting this together. I know you've got some questions for Dr. Varma.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have been talking a lot about COVID-19. Everybody knows all the positive and the negative aspects of it, and the impact also that has turned into fishing and boating industries and how it has changed the relationship that we all have with the outdoors. So when we launched our campaign last year, the Get On Board campaign, we partner with Dr. Sue Varma, who is here with us today. So happy to have you, Sue. Thank you so much. Dr. Sue Varma, she's a board certified psychiatrist and national media contributor, and it was instrumental for us to achieve all the goals and the success with the Get On Board campaign. So we are thrilled to have you here today to share with us a little bit of your area of expertise and how do you see mental health, the impact that mental health issues are being changed due to fishing and boating. So Dr. Varma, just to start, I would love to hear a little bit more about you and your background and all your work with mental wellness and everything new that you have to share with us.
Thank you so much, Bruna. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for being here today and for taking your lunchtime and bringing your nachos and cheese strings on board with us to have this important conversation. So as Bruna mentioned, I am a psychiatrist, and I really am interested in the area of wellness. And what's interesting is that, you know, when I first went to medical school, like any other, you know, young person in their 20s, they feel very ambitious. And I was interested in learning about illness, right? And this idea of how do we go from, let's say, dysfunction to functional. But I want to say in the last 5 to 7 years, I've become more interested in how do we go from functional to optimal. And I really think that it's important that we look to this area of wellness. And, you know, the wellness industry looks at physical health, but I felt that it really was leaving out the mental wellness aspect. And an interesting statistic is, you know, on a good day, pre-COVID, 1 out of 5 people had some sort of mental health disorder. But the reality is that 5 out of 5 people have mental health. And so we really need to broaden the conversation and see, are there tools or tips to not only treat, which was an area that I used to be interested in, but also to prevent. And my work started out working with 9/11 survivors. And I was the first medical director of a program at NYU, which was one of the 3 centers of excellence for trauma care after 9/11. And I learned a lot about resilience. And it was interesting that what I would learn then, little did I know that, you know, fast forward, you know, 20 years, we would be in the middle of a pandemic. And that a lot of the skills that I learned from my patients, from the groups that I was leading, from the individual therapy and the work that I was doing and the trainings that I was receiving, that I would need to use some of these skills with my patients and also in speaking with the public. So it really is an interesting time to learn about how flexible the human spirit is. And they say, you know, what doesn't, you know, if we don't want to break, we need to bend. And this year has been about learning about this flexibility, adaptability, and coping.
Absolutely. And within your area of expertise, so how do you see the pandemic affecting the way we see well-being today, and what can we expect for the years to come as well?
Yes. So look, I like to think of myself, I call myself a practical optimist, and it's an area that I'm working on in terms of like writing and thinking about how we need to be realistic, right? So I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but the real stats are that people have been affected by this. And at the same time, I want to be hopeful and positive for the future. So just some, brief statistics, 50 to 70% of people have experienced at least one stress symptom of some sort. And whether that might be a low mood or low energy, difficulty with concentration, irritability, difficulty sleeping. We know that all of us are, stuck at home, working from home, and that has brought its own challenges, remote learning with families, couples having more issues, spending a lot of sort of quantity of time in close quarters, not necessarily quality of time. People have lost loved ones, people have gotten ill, people have lost jobs. So there've been a lot of losses. There've been a lot of, grieving, and we haven't been able to come together in all the typical ways when people grieve after any kind of, mass disaster in the past. We've been able to hold hands and hug and see each other, attend funerals, or even just rites of passage, attending graduations, proms, weddings. So we've been missing things. And there are two important things that I say. Number one, grief and gratitude can coexist. So you can feel sad, but you could also be grateful for the roof that you might have over your head, of the little things in life that are still there. And also that grief is not just the things that we have lost, it's also the things that we didn't get to have. So really, I think for me, the overall idea of the pandemic has shifted my idea in terms of what are the essentials in life. And really, we don't need a lot to be happy, and that's something I'm learning even on a personal level of what really matters when it comes down to it.
And taking to the positive aspect of it. So how have you seen the relationship between us, between we all with the outdoors, and the effect that the water, being close to water, being close to nature has been developing ourselves and within our area of expertise? I know that one of the foundations that we used on our campaign last year was the 4 M's. So I would love to hear a little bit more about that and any other thesis that you have been working on.
Sure. Yeah. And I think it's so wonderful. Thank you for bringing that up, because the pandemic, I think in a lot of ways, fast forwarded the way that I thought about how do we communicate wellness and health to individuals, and how do we communicate in general. And the work that I do with public speaking and with the media has sort of been a parallel track, to the work that I do. And a big reason why, in addition to being a physician psychiatrist in my private practice, I'm also a cognitive behavioral therapist. So I like to give people tools. I'm very much about, think of me as a coach. And I think that takes the stigma away, because people have an association that you only see a psychiatrist when things are really bad. And I don't look at it. I mean, granted, most people won't see a psychiatrist until something has gone off or shifted in their life. But I really want to think of that. What are the tangible takeaways that people can incorporate into their life? And so, I have been speaking on all the major channels, like the first week when we went into quarantine, CNN, CBS, This Morning, the Today Show, NBC Nightly News, like all of them. And you are, forced to speak in these sort of 30-second sound bites. And people want information about not only, what the problem is. And Albert Einstein has this great quote that, like, if you only have an hour to solve a problem, he said, spend 50 to 55 minutes on the problem, understanding it, and 5 minutes on the solution. So really, I was forced to be in a position of like, go, what's the solution? And I was like, okay, first of all, we're in a parallel crisis. In addition to the pandemic, there's also a mental health fallout. And you wanted me to solve the entire world's problem in 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes. That's a good segment if you get 5 minutes. And out of that, half of it is talking to the anchor and listening to their questions, and sometimes not even, having an idea what the question is going to be. You have a general sense of what the topic might be. So the 4 M's came where I was like, okay, I have a very limited amount of time. I want the most bang for the buck. I want people to be able to incorporate something right now, not tomorrow. And I want something that's accessible and that's affordable. And for a lot of people, mental health therapy is not always, unfortunately. I do hope that what we can do in the future is mainstream mental health into primary care. And a lot of that is happening, and getting referrals from primary care doctors, or even being able to schedule a visit. And that's something I often recommend to people, scheduling a visit with your primary care doctor specifically for mental health. But the 4 M's came, because one night somewhere amongst, 50 live interviews during that first week, I was like, I need to make this quick. And so the 4 M's are mindfulness, meditation, movement, and mastery. And when RBFF reached out to me, I have mentioned this before, I don't say yes to the vast majority of projects that come my way because I really want to be neutral and objective. I want people to have good, scientific, credible, evidence-based information, and I wanted to partner with a brand that I believe in, that has integrity, and that cares about improving the state of the world. And this was very much, what I felt that the RBFF mission was a variety of things. How do we make boating and fishing more approachable, more accessible? Me being, a woman, a minority woman. I lived in an urban environment for much of my life for my training in New York City. I'm not your typical person who you would think of, fishing. I didn't grow up doing this. And so I love the idea that this campaign allowed the 4 M's, that when you're on the boat, you're practicing a skill. So there's checking off the mastery, and you don't have to be a master to experience mastery. And I think that's the one biggest thing. Mastery to me is being engaged in whatever work that you're doing or hobby that you're doing where you're learning, and the learning level is slightly above what your skill level might be. So there's a little bit of a challenge, and that challenge is enough to keep you stimulated, assuming you're interested in it already. So you're able to check that box off. You get the meaningful engagement because you can spend time if you decide you want to go with somebody, but you don't have to. And people really don't realize that being alone also has its own benefits and mental health benefits of being able to process information, calm down. So if you're with somebody, wonderful. You have the time to engage because you're not feeling threatened where you're having these face-to-face conversations. You might be sitting side to side, or you're just enjoying experiences, you're making memories, you're making positive deposits in the relationship. It's something you can do outdoors. So social distancing point of view, I think it was really great. And I definitely want to talk to you about the benefits of nature in a minute, but just to finish the 4 M's, there's a mindfulness, a meditative component, and even just being on the water. So let's say you went fishing with somebody who doesn't know how to fish. And I love the fact that the takemefishing.org website had tons of resources and information for people like me or newcomers, and lowered the sort of entry barrier and the intimidation level by giving you all the information. And there were CDC guidelines that you can read and find out where is it safe and all of that. But these meditative, they call them sort of these blue states blue states sort of zone, like that you can be in where your mind is calm. So as opposed to like being in a red state of mind where you are fight or flight or feeling hyper vigilant or threatened, being in a blue state of mind is more meditative, calming, relaxing, and you're doing something sort of repetitive, or just sometimes I hate to say zoning out, even though mindfulness really is about paying attention. But it might feel like you're zoning out because you're not paying attention to anything else except the one activity that you're doing. And it really requires concentration. And so I think that there is something to be said about that. And then movement, if you're on the water, near the water, getting your stuff together. So I love the fact that this was something that we could do socially distanced, safe outside. And my appreciation on a personal level for being outdoors has like exponentially exploded. I have always been a big believer in it. They call it forest bathing in Japan, and in Scotland, doctors are prescribing it. In urban areas, pediatricians are prescribing it to children. And so if we want to expand to the bigger conversation of nature in general as a prescription, there was a great Wall Street Journal article this week that was talking about just 2 hours in nature in a week could be extremely beneficial. And we're looking at the role of urban nature. How do I have more parks? Obviously you want safety and fresh air, so there's a lot that goes into it. But I've been doing a lot of hiking, swimming in any kind of, I love to swim in the ocean, in any kind of body of water. I love being on a boat. I've always loved that. And I find that it's very, very calming, for my nervous system. I find that it stimulates our vagal nerve. And you don't have to be on a body of water, right? Like these are things that you could do at home, meditations. But people who've had either a view, if you're in a hospital bed, for example, studies find that looking out onto a rooftop that's green, or having some semblance of nature, or even listening to nature sounds inside the house. I see that you have a beautiful plant behind you, putting plants in the house. So there are different ways to invoke the feeling of being in nature, even if you're not allowed to or don't have the time to.
Absolutely. And that's why it was so fascinating, because we totally saw fishing and boating so much going together hand in hand with the 4 M's, especially on the mindful aspect of it. And as you were saying, like you can do by yourself, or you can also do with your family, but you still have that time that you're waiting for the fish to bite, that you're kind of like focused and in silence because you cannot make too much movement, so you don't want to scare the fish. So anyways, it was just to reinforce that we really see this connection. And you actually went with your family fishing for the first time last year, right?
Yeah.
How was that experience?
Oh my God, it was amazing. You know, it's interesting because my husband has been going for quite some time, and usually he would make a boys trip out of it. And he would say to me, "You love being on the water. Why don't you try?" And I just never got around to it. And I have 2 kids, and we went with an entire family, in-laws, grandparents. So it really was like 3 generation. And what an experience, and what a beautiful day. Like, we just got lucky, everything aligned, and we caught a lot of fish, and it lasted us for months. And it was such a lovely, I want to say, bonding experience for everybody, because there are not that many opportunities when people are all together and enjoying some aspect of it, regardless of whatever their interest is, and that you have this shared experience. And so many people have said to me that a lot of their memories growing up, looking back with extended family, have been around this experience. And it was my first time fishing for my kids even. So when it's one of those, like, there are few memories that will be in the books forever. And this was certainly one of them: the planning, the packing, the excitement of the day itself, and then enjoying the fish afterwards.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I have one last question for you. So do you have any advice to encourage people to reinforce the importance of keep thinking about wellness in general, and how can we turn into tangible actions when we are talking about, like, fishing and boating, our activities, and even cross other activities like camping and hiking? How can we tangible send this message to people, like being outdoors, it is mind changing, and fishing and boating, it is a way for you to reduce your anxiety levels and be more content overall.
Absolutely. And I think, a few things that I have learned in communicating wellness is providing evidence in sort of short, tangible ways to, like, provide a statistics to say, we find that people who spend 2 hours in nature once a week will get benefits, but they need to spend at least this amount of time. I have used social media. I'm quite active on Instagram, and I have had to sort of experiment with how do we give people information that doesn't seem to be tone deaf about their experience, right? Because somebody might say, "Dr. Varma, like, I don't even want to get out of bed. What are you talking about planning a boating trip, fishing trip? Or that's not for me, or I can't afford it." So I realized that, you want to sort of be inclusive in the message and to meet the person where they're at. So I would often say things like, "I know that, guys, this is really tough. And I know that the pandemic has been hard for everybody." So sort of starting with some validating statement to let the person know that I hear you, I see you, you're not alone, I know where you're coming from. And I know that this might be a tall order. Here are some simple things you can do. And so the 4 M's, and a lot of people really took to that, and it became like a hashtag on Instagram, trending for some time, because people started posting. And I would love it if you all wanted to share what your 4 M's are, and people would share with me that I've never met in another part of the world, that this is what I did with my family. I'm skiing this winter, I'm doing, whatever it might be. So I think providing motivation to people, providing accountability. I love that you guys had this participant of the day. I think we're all a little competitive in nature. So maybe putting some competition. And, I know people who've been part of groups at work that says, okay, whoever can walk the most miles, to have like wellness and fitness challenges related to work. So I think that there's a lot of ways. And then just giving people one stat, one fact, and telling them how to do it, and lowering the entry barrier and saying, it's okay if you don't get to it this week, that's fine. Normalize the situation, validate, normalize all of that, and then provide resources like links to things to say, here, this is, how we would go about doing it. Or like, are you someone who's never done fishing? What would it take? And sort of like, sometimes I'll poll people, on social media to be like, do you, how do you feel? Is this the reason why? Or what are some reasons if you haven't tried it? And understanding what the obstacles are. And I kind of feel like this can be generalized to anytime you want to make behavioral change, understanding, giving people, we've all heard of like the SMART terminology, like small or measurable, achievable, making goals, and then having accountability, and then having follow-up. So, knowing sort of where the obstacles are and the barriers, and trying to lower them for people.
Absolutely. That's exactly what we are going to work on moving forward, like lowering the barriers, as you said, to make sure that these newcomers that arrived into fishing and boating can keep doing it, and to attract even more newcomers to the sport, like showing that that it's easier and more affordable and more accessible than people think. Like, it's not only just for the big fish, you know, it's, as you
Right.
said, the entire experience. So that's wonderful to hear.
Yes. And also I think just, sharing people their own experiences and having images of like diversity, which you guys were great at, to showing, women or whatever it might be with their kids. Like, I think that's very empowering, because I think it's often associated as a male sport. So showing that it's not as complicated as you think, and even having links to like, this is what you need to buy, this is all you would need in your kit, like just, making it as concrete as possible.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think we're gonna open up for questions and answers, right? I'm pretty sure we have.
Yeah, you bet.
Coming up, Jay.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Let's clap it up real quick here for Bruna, Dr. Varma. Well done.
Thank you.
A couple questions from me, and then we'll open it up to the rest of the crew here. What do you think happens next, Dr. Sue, from a mental health standpoint, right? People are getting vaccinated and case rates are down. Do we sort of snap back into our old habits and patterns pretty quickly, or does this kind of usher in a whole new era of additional emphasis on mental health and relaxation? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I'm sure this is something you've pondered.
Absolutely. And I love that what you're saying, because I think we need to be realistic. Look, when we first went into quarantine, the idea was I was doing a lot of research and I was reading about people who went into shutdown. In 10 days, they started experiencing stress symptoms and anxiety symptoms. And here we are, right? More than 10 months later, almost going on a year. So we have to give ourselves a lot of grace. And we have been through so much. When we hear the numbers, when we listen to the stats in the media, that it can be very sobering and sometimes depressing to hear about the death toll and a lot of what's happened. So I think it's fair to say that we may experience after effects. Some people will experience depression, anxiety for a number of reasons. I think it's helpful to understand that what were all the triggers that were associated with it? Is it job loss? Is it financial losses? Is it illness? So to understand that there are concrete things that have gone into this, and we need to look at those and see what we can do. So will there be after effects? Probably, but I also think that knowing this, I think we can be better prepared. And one of the things that I love is telehealth became really mainstream during this time. And that was not the case before. Before, insurance companies, if you're lucky enough to have insurance, they did not reimburse patients to see their behavioral health provider via telehealth. Now, this is one of the beauties, just the way that remote learning challenges during snow days, for example, or being able to have virtual conferences where before, if we had a live conference, you would be limited to, the 50 people in the room that could fit. Now you can literally get hundreds or thousands all over. So there's so many, every aspect of life has changed. Technology has changed. The barriers that we once conceived in our head really are barriers in our head. That has changed. So I do think that the conversation around mental health has become amplified, because I'm finding out that when people are reaching out to me to say, oh, Dr. Varma, we want you to talk about this for an interview, the producers are also curbside consulting me by the way, do you have 5 minutes? So I know that this is something that all of us, this used to be, mental health was for people, those people. It is not for those people. It is for all of us, mental health and wellness.
I'd like to get on that too. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'd like to just carry Dr. Sue Varma around with me all the time and just answer my questions on an hour-to-hour basis, if that's okay. That'd be great.
Sure. You have a pocket on that vest, just slip it down.
I do. Yeah. Absolutely. One of the things that we've talked about and we'll continue to talk about in these meetings is how a lot of people who went fishing for the first time, as you did, that stemmed from their children thinking, oh, that would be fun. We should go do that as a family. What differences do you see in mental health under these trying current conditions in children versus adults? And do you think the ramifications of fishing are different for young people versus adults?
I think that one of the biggest pieces, the challenges of COVID was the loneliness aspect. And we know that loneliness is equivalent, has the same detrimental effect on the body as, let's say, smoking 15 cigarettes per day. This is what they found out. And anything that you can reduce to do for the loneliness, I think will have an impact across the ages. Every group, especially younger folks, teenagers, Gen Z, are having they're actually having the highest amount of loneliness, them and the greatest generation. And we found that telephone calls, this just was news this week, that telephone calls to our older adults reduces the loneliness. And loneliness, as I said, impacts every aspect of your body. High blood pressure, obesity, causes depression, anxiety, premature death. So if there's something that I want to say that's universal about the fishing and the boating experience, is that you can feel relatively safer. I mean, there's no perfect solution, but yes, we're getting vaccinated, and I do feel much more comfortable being outdoors with other people. You know, they still are saying that we need to wear not just one mask, but potentially two. But the whole idea is outside ventilation, circulation. As a physician, I feel safe. And I have to say, I've also gotten vaccinated, so I'm in a different situation right now, but I do want to encourage people to get vaccinated. We need to move on, you know, with our lives. And this is one way forward.
One of the things that was going on in the chat was a little bit of conversation. Frank mentioned it, and Frank, feel free to jump on camera if you want to elaborate on this point, that sometimes in this industry, a lot of the marketing and the communications is about catch fish or catch a big fish or catch all these different fish. And then it becomes almost a process of you have to get to an outcome in order to call yourself a fisherman, and that maybe that's not actually what we should be emphasizing. Frank, do you want to elaborate on what you were talking about in the chat?
Well, there was a whole bunch of stuff going on in the chat, much more so than my little 2 cents in there. But I do believe we need to focus on the experience itself, all the different parts of the experience, and being outdoors, the sunrises, the sunsets, the wind blowing in your hair, all those other things. The kids maybe not paying attention to the rod, but going and picking up rocks and skimming them across the lake or whatever the case may be. But I think it comes down, Jay, to understanding who the different audiences are. And if we're looking to grow these sports, I mean, there's no doubt that this year or last year, 2020, the number of people who went fishing grew tremendously. As a matter of fact, number of people that participated in a lot of outdoor activities grew tremendously. But the reasons for doing it were totally different than maybe the avid people who've been fishing all their life. And we need to recognize that. And I think we have the opportunity to better understand who our audience segments are, and then the messaging that resounds to them. There's always going to be a group of people, probably my age, who get excited about the big fish, but there's going to be, you know, people that are Bruna's age or in that age category, or Kendra's age, who's on our team, that it's a whole different experience. So one size does not fit all. Our communications needs to be segmented to the audience we're approaching. And I do believe that, I think I read the article, Dr. Varma, was the 2 hours outdoors is the new 10,000 steps. Is that the article you were referring to?
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, we're going to continue to be able to benefit, and we should tell that story, that you know, fishing and boating, like other outdoor activities, can lead to your mental well-being. And it's going to be a cornerstone of our campaign this year also.
The water is open.
Everyone.
The water is open. Yes. Dr. Varma, have you seen any differences in mental health and sort of effects of the pandemic by region or by population density, cities versus exurban or rural environments, and what lessons can we draw from that?
Yeah, it's so interesting that you mentioned that, because a study just came out about what were the risk factors that are going to increase who gets depression during this period of time. And they said people who have had COVID, so that was one thing, women, minority women, and also people living in urban areas. And we think that urban areas, whether it's correlation versus causation, I think because you have a more popular, population density in that area, social distancing is much more harder to do. People are literally on top of each other. The risk for getting sick is harder. There's a wide variety of reasons why that might be the case. And obviously we know that minority communities, a lot of them are essential workers, or maybe don't have the opportunity to social distance, or because of underlying medical problems, or because getting COVID care isn't realistic, or primary care isn't realistic. There's a million reasons: access to healthcare, access to treatment, the way they're perceived. So there's a lot of things that we have learned in 2020 about having a certain mind frame and openness, and being open to conversation and dialogue, and understanding and having sort of more sensitivity to a variety of issues.
And Jay, I can add to that, 39%
Please.
of the new people who participated in 2020 were younger, more diverse urban families. So our messaging got out to them. They got out 39% of the new participants, and which is quite a staggering statistic when you compare that to 2019 and the representation of those groups. So I think everybody on this in this meeting needs to understand that urban customer is out there and they're longing for things to do. And these activities that we promote are excellent to do that.
So true, Frank. One more question from me, and then we have a few more minutes with Dr. Varma. So we're going to do this a little differently because we have a couple of minutes. I'm going to ask you all to use the reactions button. You may remember that. And you see one that says raise hand. If you'd like to actually ask a question live of Dr. Varma, I'll let you do that. Please, no parrots, monkeys, or great horned owls invited to the broadcast. And then the fabulous KP, you remember KP from yesterday, she will unmute your line and unmute your camera, and you'll be able to ask a question. First, I'll ask this one for Dr. Sue. When we talk about mental health and the implications of the pandemic, et cetera, I think we all know that intuitively and feel it personally. How much, just from a communications perspective, how much does it make sense to talk about that outwardly and overtly to our potential audiences, or is there at some point or in some audiences a pushback that says, I don't want to talk about mental health, that's kind of squishy, touchy-feely stuff, I just want to fish? Like is there a disadvantage to being open and honest about these issues in some circumstances? What have you found?
You know, I think the world has changed, and I think that that people are much more open and interested and willing and honestly, I think hungry for these conversations in a way that I've never seen them before. And I think that there's a way to sort of have a broad message that is inviting to everybody, that's not off-putting, that's not deep and dark, right? We haven't talked about suicide in this conversation, even though it's something that I deal with very frequently, you know, in the world, in my practice and conversations that I have. And for some people, it can be triggering. For other people, it could be like, whoa, that's way too dark. How did I go from fishing to talking about that? But I could say that when the idea of mental wellness, and what I love about that word is that it's an umbrella term, and wellness includes health. And they say, you know, when we work together, when we change the I in illness to we, even illness becomes wellness. So there's this idea that we have a certain shared responsibility to look out for one another. And part of that are these types of messages. Like what you guys are doing right now, in my mind, it's very forward thinking, it's very futuristic. And you're saying like, you know, we're going to get ahead of the curve, because that is the conversation. That is the 2021, 2022 conversation, is how do we rebuild? And there's no conversation about rebuilding without the concept of resilience. And how do you talk about resilience without talking about your brain? Your brain is the, you know, chairperson of your body. And we don't realize when we think of, you know, everything that you do, every decision that you make is coming from your brain, right? It's not your liver or your gut that's saying like, I'm going to do this today. You know, if you're going fishing, who's got the executive function? It's the brain. It's the brain is the organ. So you have to take care of your brain. And people don't realize that the brain functions, including concentration, memory, attention, executive functioning. All of that is required to do any activity that you like. And that is part of mental wellness, because unfortunately, people don't realize that when a person is depressed or anxious, all of those mental faculties, your ability to achieve, your ability to be successful, kind of go out the window. So, you know, I want to like to call myself a performance coach, you know, or a career coach. Or like I wear a lot of different hats in the work that I do with patients, because it really is not just about, well, let's talk about depression. It's like, no, let's get you fabulous. Like that's the work that I do. I created a 6-episode series on depression with a group called MedCircle, and it won an award, a ShareCare Emmy Award. The Emmys partnered with this organization, ShareCare, and it was a 6-episode series about taking people from dysfunction, not just, you know, to function, but functional to optimal. So I really wanted people to think of a broader message of 5 out of 5 people have mental wellness. And we're striving to be our best selves. And a lot of people haven't felt like their best selves in a long time. You know, and they might have said, well, maybe one shoe had dropped before the pandemic and the second one dropped during it. And I'm like, okay, let's get your shoes back on and let's get you out the door.
Yeah, I don't remember what my best self felt like. It's been a bit, but I do like 5 out of 5 people are interested in wellness. That is a great way to phrase it. Hey, Bruna, I was going to ask you what comes next in this association with Dr. Varma. Like, where do we go from here from an RBFF standpoint?
Well, for 2021, we still have this, as Dr. Varma mentioned, we still have this need to talk about the wellness and to be your own self and to be your best self to keep moving forward. So that's we are moving forward with this message, like how being outdoors can support you to be your best self, and the importance of people to support one another during this process. And as Dr. Varma said, we've also moving forward, getting vaccinated, moving forward with our own lives, and making sure we have more and more people on the water enjoying the benefits that being nature and fishing and boating and other outdoor activities makes on your mind, your body, and your soul.
Thanks so much. Go ahead, Frank.
Really, the key thing to us in this coming year, the water is open. Sorry about that. Didn't have my voice. Not that you need to see me. The water is open to everyone, and there are going to be different reasons why everyone is going to want to go there, and the mental health benefits are key to that. So, I think we're going to continue down this road as long as the audiences we're trying to attract find the messaging appealing. We had probably 2020 was the best year for overall participation in the history of fishing and boating, in the history that goes back hundreds of years in this country. So I think it's going to be key to the immediate future and down the road. Okay.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks so much, Frank. Dr. Varma, last one for you. There's a question in the chat. If you've got some ideas on resources that our state agencies can use to communicate the health benefits of being outdoors, are there sort of a go-to articles or infographics or studies, and that maybe not be something that you're prepared to spout off from the top of your head, and maybe we'll get a couple of links from you after the broadcast, but just wanted to throw it out there.
Sure, yeah. So, in general, the American Psychiatric Association, in general, I think the take home for me would be to help recognize, how do we help recognize, let's say, signs and symptoms of mental health issues within ourselves, within family members. So I know that you're asking about resources related to outdoors. But I would say sort of more broadly, the American Psychiatric Association is one resource, NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Illness, the APA, which is the American Psychological Association. They have studies on benefits of nature and outdoors and children specifically. And then the recent Wall Street Journal article summarizes a bunch of different studies. And I can also share afterwards a few of the studies related to nature. And they're really in very well-respected scientific journals like Nature and Science. And then also I've curated content on my social media page at Dr. Sue Varma, and it's across platforms. Instagram is the largest one, where I have information on everything from work burnout to COVID-related anxiety to relationship problems, and specifically how to meditate, how to do something what we call the progressive muscle relaxation, which is something I shared in an interview I did last week with CBS This Morning, where Gail King asked me, like, give me one take home that I'm going to do tonight. And I literally on the show said, okay, Gail, close your eyes. We're going to do this exercise together. And it has to do with a sequence of exercises. It's 20 minutes, and it's called, progressive muscle relaxation, where you like tighten your fists, you relax them, and it's posted. I have a little cute graphic about how to do progressive muscle relaxation on my Instagram. So if you're not on Instagram, please join it. We can stay connected. I constantly put very tangible takeaways for people.
Dr. Sue, thank you. If it's good enough for Gail, it's good enough for me. I appreciate that very much. Thanks again for being here. What a terrific presentation and conversation. Bruna, thank you as well. We really appreciate your time and your commitment to the cause. Thank you so much.
Thank you
guys.
Thank you.